"We don't need you, get out. Just your ranch money," my son Marcello declared to me that evening. Those words came from the same boy who once slept against my chest, with fingers so tiny they resembled flower petals. The same child who would cry if I stepped away, even briefly, at the playground. The same little one who years before would call out, "Mama," when he stumbled and scraped his knee. That night, he wouldn't even meet my gaze. He stood there on the other side of our ranch kitchen, scrolling through his phone as if stating some cold fact, an emotionless equation. To him, I had become nothing more than an income source, a monthly figure that kept this Texas homestead afloat. I held a wooden spoon in my hand, stirring the rice so it wouldn't stick. The brisket was already smoking in the outdoor pit. Valentina had mentioned wanting cornbread, so I'd prepared that too. The heat was sweltering, my back ached, and I'd spent the entire day cleaning and washing because we were expecting company. Yet still, I managed to smile when little Sophia came running to embrace me. She was the only reason I continued enduring everything. After Marcello spoke those words, nobody else said anything. Valentina, standing in the hallway, barely smiled and said nothing. But she didn't need to. She had already won. I didn't utter a single word either. I finished stirring the rice, turned off the heat, and with trembling hands removed my apron. I couldn't tell if I felt anger, sadness, or some deadly mixture of both. I walked to the utility room, turned on the faucet, and splashed water on my face. I had to calm myself. Not in front of them. Not there. Not that night. Sleep eluded me completely. I lay in the same bed that had belonged to Salvatore, my late husband, and me for nearly 4 decades. The bedroom that now barely felt like mine. The walls no longer belonged to me. My belongings had been reduced to a dresser and a box beneath the bed. Everything else served as storage space. My life, compressed. I stared at the ceiling for hours. I didn't cry. I had no tears left. While listening to the gentle hum of the ceiling fan, only one question crossed my mind. How did we reach this point? Going back to the beginning isn't easy. Sometimes one prefers not to stir up what hurts. But now I know it's necessary. 3 years after Salvatore's passing, the ranch house became too vast. Initially, the solitude seemed like a gentle echo, a whisper that left me in peace. But as months passed, that silence transformed into a bottomless well. That's why when Marcello asked for help, I didn't hesitate for a second. "Mama, Valentina lost her job at the oil company. We're behind on rent in town and don't know what to do. Come to the ranch," I said without thinking. "There's plenty of space here." They arrived one January afternoon with Sophia in tow, and 3 large suitcases. I had prepared the guest room, changed the linens, even bought a new lamp. I was happy to have my family back. Sophia hugged me tight and whispered in my ear, "I missed you so much, Nonna." I thought everything would work out fine. Over time, I began noticing small things. Valentina never looked at me directly, always seeming busy or annoyed about something. At first, I attributed it to stress, the pressure of unemployment, the adjustment period. But then the comments started. "Your mama doesn't respect boundaries," she'd tell Marcello when she thought I wasn't listening. "She's always there, acting like this ranch belongs only to her." And yes, it was mine, legally and completely documented in my name. But I didn't say anything. I didn't want to cause conflict. Gradually, the ranch began changing. I continued cooking, cleaning, paying the bills. My Social Security, though modest, covered electricity, gas, and part of the groceries. Marcello had found work in the oil fields, but it wasn't steady. Valentina still wasn't working, though she wore new clothes every month. Yet somehow, I began to feel like I was in the way. Or at least, that's how they made me feel. One evening, Valentina asked me not to sit for dinner with them, because they needed to talk as a couple. The next day, my chair wasn't there. They had removed it from the table. I became invisible but continued making breakfast, grocery shopping, taking Sophia to school when Valentina had migraines or was too busy. I became a shadow that sustained everyone's routine without anyone acknowledging it. Until one morning, Marcello asked if I could put the ranch in his name. He said it would be more practical for everyone, that in case of emergency, it would be better if things were in order. I looked at him for a long time. Then I did it. I went to the notary, signed, handed over everything, trusted. I never thought they'd make me pay for it, like this. A month later, my room was reduced. My private bathroom became shared. My independence erased. I became a background figure. Nobody asked how I was. Nobody listened to me except Sophia. She remained my light. Every night she'd slip into my bed despite Valentina's annoyance. She'd tell me what she learned in school, draw me flowers, tell me she loved me very much. She was the only reason I didn't pack my things and leave, though I no longer had anywhere to go. I had given everything. That night, after Marcello's comment, I understood something. It wasn't a mistake. It wasn't a bad moment. It wasn't a phrase spoken without thinking. It was what he thought, what he felt, what he believed. And then, for the first time in years, I felt something inside me break. But not with pain, with clarity. I went to the kitchen after everyone was asleep. I sat facing the cold oven, looked at the rice pot still warm. Then I took my old notebook, the one I used for writing recipes, and wrote a single sentence. I deserve more than this. The next day I got up early, made coffee, combed my hair, put on the blue dress that Salvatore always said made me look like a summer sky, and left without saying where I was going, without asking permission. It wasn't with a suitcase. It was with purpose. I didn't walk far. I didn't have a clear destination, but my feet knew where to go. Sometimes the body gets ahead of consciousness. I crossed 2 streets, past a bakery that still smelled of fresh dough, and arrived in front of a place I hadn't visited in years. It was a modest cafe, with hanging plants at the entrance and wrought iron chairs. A wooden sign read, Francesca's Corner. I hesitated for a second, but went in. She was there, sitting behind the counter, browsing a magazine. She had her hair pulled back in a messy bun, and glasses hanging on the tip of her nose. She looked at me and for a moment frowned, as if she didn't recognize me. Then her eyes widened. "Isabella!" she exclaimed with a smile that gave me back a piece of youth. Good heavens, what a surprise! I didn't know what to say to her. My hands were shaking. Francesca had been my soul friend in our youth. We were inseparable until life took us down different paths. She chose to travel, study abroad, marry a Chilean man she later left. I stayed in the neighborhood, married Salvatore, raised Marcello, was a housewife my entire life. She lived 1,000 things. I lived in a circle. Still, in that instant, I felt that time didn't matter. We hugged as if we had seen each other yesterday. "What brings you here?" she asked, serving me coffee without even offering it, as if she knew I needed it. "I don't know," I answered honestly. "I just needed to get out of my house." "Then you're in the right place," she said, pointing to a table by the window. "Here nobody rushes, nobody demands, and there's always hot coffee." We sat down, and I told her in pieces what had happened. Not everything, not yet, but enough for her to understand that something inside me had broken. Francesca listened without interrupting. Only once did she frown when I mentioned Marcello's phrase. Then she remained silent for a few seconds. "You know what?" she said finally. "You were always stronger than you believed." I smiled incredulously. "I don't seem like it." "Because they taught you to be quiet, to sacrifice yourself, to not ask for anything. But that's not strength, Isabella. That's submission. And you can get out of there." I didn't respond, but those words stuck like seeds. I returned home before noon. Valentina looked at me as I entered from the sofa with a furrowed brow. "Where were you?" "Taking a walk." "Without letting us know?" Marcello was worried. Lie. He didn't even notice my absence, but I said nothing. I went up to my room, closed the door, and lay down. Sophia came in shortly after. "Are you okay?" "Yes, my love, just a little tired." She curled up beside me. Her warmth was a balm. She told me about a drawing she had made in class of a woman with a cape flying over a city. "She's a hero. I called her Blue Isabella, after you, of course. You're my hero." I didn't cry, but it was hard to swallow. That night, while everyone slept, I wrote another sentence in my notebook. I don't need permission to start over. The following days were different. I was the same, but something had changed. I no longer responded immediately when Valentina demanded something. I no longer hurried to set the table or wash dishes as soon as they finished. It wasn't rebellion. It was dignity. Small acts of resistance that nobody noticed at first. On a Thursday afternoon, I returned to the cafe. Francesca was waiting for me with a tray of biscuits and 2 coffees. We sat on the terrace. She told me about her travels, how she decided to open the place after her divorce. She did it with her savings and a small inheritance. She showed me old photos. We laughed a lot. I felt alive. "Why don't you come more often?" she said. "You could even help me with some recipes. I know you cook wonderfully. Working here, I don't see it as work. I see it as regaining control." I returned home with a mixture of enthusiasm and fear. That night during dinner, I casually mentioned, "Today I was at a friend's cafe. She offered to help her with the cooking." Marcello didn't look up. Valentina did. "Work? At your age?" "Yes, why not?" "Because you don't need to do it. You already have social security. Besides, who will take care of Sophia when we're not here? Sophia is 12 years old. She can go to school alone. And I need something for myself." Silence took over the table. Nobody supported me, but nobody forbade me either. So I returned to the cafe. The first days I felt clumsy, slow, out of place. But Francesca encouraged me, taught me to use the register, prepare coffee with the new machine, organize the display cases. She even let me decorate a corner with antique objects I had stored at home. A pendulum clock, a tea set inherited from my mother, a vase with dried daisies. Curious customers began arriving for that nostalgic space. I served them with a smile. I felt useful, visible, valuable. One day I met Luigi. He entered with slow steps, cane in hand, and a polite smile. He ordered honey tea and sat down to read the newspaper. He returned every Thursday. Sometimes we talked about books, other times about politics. He told me he was a retired lawyer, intelligent, kind, always well-dressed. He liked to listen more than talk. He made me feel respected. One afternoon while we were closing, Francesca looked at me mischievously. "I think Luigi likes you." I laughed nervously. "Don't be ridiculous." "Why? You're a beautiful woman, Isabella. You've lived, you've loved. Why couldn't you do it again?" I didn't know how to respond. I wasn't ready to think about that, but it was pleasant to hear it. One Friday, returning home, I found my things piled in the living room. Clothes, books, a box with photographs, my sewing kit. Everything outside my room. "What is this?" Valentina, with her arms crossed, responded without flinching. "We need space. We're going to remodel and convert that room into an office. We've prepared a corner for you in the utility room. There's a cot there." I was breathless, not from the humiliation, but from the coldness. "And Marcello agrees?" "He signed the papers, remember? The ranch is no longer yours." I didn't respond. I approached, took one of my photos, me with Salvatore and little Marcello, and hugged it against my chest. Then I went upstairs. I slept in the utility room. But that night I wrote one last sentence in my notebook. The day is approaching when they'll stop underestimating me. I barely slept that night. My body was exhausted, but my mind wouldn't stop racing. The utility room smelled of dampness and old detergent. Every noise in the house was amplified between the concrete walls. But more than that, what kept me awake wasn't the memory of what had happened that night, but of everything I had allowed before. I thought about the years I cooked every dinner with care, the times I took care of Sophia when she was sick, the nights I got up without making noise so as not to bother anyone, every time I accepted a cutting word without replying. When exactly did I become an invisible presence in my own family? The next morning I showered early and dressed as always, with my favorite blouse and an embroidered scarf my mother had given me years ago. Valentina didn't even look at me when I left the house. Marcello locked himself in his study, claiming an urgent video call. I didn't have breakfast. I wasn't hungry. I walked to the cafe feeling a weight in my chest that wouldn't ease. But as soon as I opened the door to Francesca's corner and heard the little bell, something in me settled. Francesca immediately noticed my expression. What happened now? They kicked me out of my room. I'm sleeping in the utility room. She stopped cleaning the coffee machine and looked at me intently, as if she wanted to make sure she had heard correctly. How did they kick you out? They need space. They're going to convert my room into an office. Francesca removed her apron with a sharp movement and approached me. You can't keep allowing this, Isabella. This isn't normal, fair, or human. It's their house. Legally, I no longer have any right to anything. Maybe. But morally, they have no right to treat you like this. We remained silent for a few seconds. Then she took my hand. There are ways to defend yourself. I know someone who could help you. He's a lawyer, very good. His name is Luigi. Luigi, the customer? Yes. Sometimes he does consultations even though he's retired. He doesn't charge. He does it because he believes in justice. I don't know, Francesca. I don't want to take this to that level. And what level do you think this is? Sleeping among rags and buckets? Seeing your things piled up like your trash? I was speechless. She was right. Every day that passed, I convinced myself that I deserved the minimum, that I should be grateful for a roof and a plate of food, even though everything came loaded with contempt. But that wasn't the life I wanted. Luigi stopped by in the afternoon. Francesca had told him everything, and he, with that serenity that seemed unshakable, sat with me with a notebook in hand. The first thing you should know, he told me, is that although you transferred ownership of the ranch, if you can prove you did it under pressure or without fully understanding the consequences, we could file a nullity lawsuit for defect of consent. Also, there's jurisprudence recognizing the rights of elderly adults in contexts of family vulnerability. What does that mean in plain English? That if we can demonstrate you suffered manipulation or emotional abuse, you could recover your part, or at least secure a dignified space in that ranch, or compensation. I looked at him incredulously. And how do you prove something like that? With witnesses, with your notebook, for example. If you keep a record of what has occurred, that can help. And if Sophia is on your side, too. I felt a knot in my stomach. I didn't want to drag my granddaughter into this, but I knew she was already in it just by loving me. I thanked Luigi and promised to think about it. That night, I returned home determined to talk to Marcello. I waited for Valentina to lock herself in the bedroom and found him in the kitchen pouring himself a glass of water. I need to talk to you. Not now, Mama. I'm tired. Now, because if I don't speak, I'm going to get sick. Marcello turned and looked at me, as if he didn't recognize me. What's wrong? Everything that's happening hurts me. It hurts to have left my house, my memories, everything I built for you all. And now, I sleep in a corner like I'm an intruder. It's not like that. Yes, it is, and you know it. I didn't ask for anything in return. I just wanted to be close, be useful, take care of Sophia. But you all threw me out of my room like I didn't matter." Marcello clenched his jaw. He said nothing. After a moment, he left without responding. The next day, I sat with Sophia in the patio. She brought a storybook, but noticed I was distant. "What's wrong, Nonna?" "I need to do something important, my love, and maybe I'll need your help." Her eyes lit up. "Whatever you want. Could you write on paper how they treat me here? I know you've seen everything." She looked down. "Is it for a lawsuit?" "Not necessarily, but I need proof to protect myself." Sophia nodded slowly, then hugged me. "I don't want you to leave. I won't leave without fighting." During the following days, Luigi and I began working in silence. He taught me how to document every fact, how to speak without my voice trembling, how to look someone in the eyes without lowering my head. Francesca supported me with everything: flexible schedules at the cafe, advice, and, above all, company. I never felt alone in that process. One afternoon when I arrived home, I found my sewing kit thrown on the floor. Some needles were broken, threads scattered, my scissors rusted. It was my most precious object. I picked it up carefully, went upstairs without saying a word, and that night, I knew the decision was made. The next day, I took all my papers to the cafe. Luigi reviewed them carefully, then looked up. "We're ready. Just tell me when you want to start the process." "Now." "Then prepare yourself, Isabella, because once you start, there's no turning back." I looked at him firmly. I don't want to go back anymore. We filed the lawsuit on a Friday morning. Luigi delivered it personally to the corresponding court and explained that now we had to wait for formal notification to Marcello and Valentina. Despite the firm step we had taken, I returned home with a lump in my throat. I felt divided. On one hand, proud of having taken that step. On the other, devastated by the idea of facing my own son before justice. But there was no turning back. It wasn't revenge. It was dignity. The following days passed in charged silence. I said nothing, and neither did they. Valentina continued walking through the house as if floating in her own world, organizing things, giving subtle orders to Sophia, completely ignoring me. Marcello avoided making eye contact with me. Only Sophia stayed close, sitting beside me every night with her books or simply in silence, holding my hand. One afternoon, while I was preparing tea in the kitchen, I heard the doorbell ring insistently. I went to answer. It was a court officer. Marcello came down when he heard the voices and stood motionless when he saw the man with the envelope in his hand. "Marcello Conti?" asked the officer. "Yes." "Court notification. You have a deadline to respond." He handed him the envelope, had him sign a receipt, and left. The silence that remained was like a crack in the middle of the house. Valentina came down immediately, and seeing the envelope in Marcello's hands, she snatched it violently. "What is this?" Marcello read quietly. His lips tightened. "It's from Mama. She sued us." Valentina looked at me as if I had just spit in her face. "What kind of lowness is this?" "A defense. I'm not going to stay quiet anymore." She laughed with contempt. "And what do you think you'll achieve? Take the house from us?" "Not just recover my right to live with dignity, to not be invisible, to not be treated like old furniture." "This is betrayal," Marcello suddenly shouted. "After everything we did for you. What did you do for me? Take away my room, turn me into a burden, use my social security as if it were yours?" Sophia appeared behind without anyone noticing. She had heard everything. She approached slowly and stood by my side. "I support her, Papa." Marcello looked at her surprised. "What are you saying?" "Nonna doesn't deserve this. I've seen how you treat her. It's not fair." Valentina let out an incredulous laugh. "Perfect! Now the girl is also turning against us." Marcello looked down. He didn't respond. Valentina went upstairs furiously, and the bedroom door slammed shut. My son looked at me for a long time. There was no hatred in his eyes. There was something worse. Shame. Was this necessary? Yes, I answered calmly. Because I tried everything before. I talked. I endured. I made myself small. But you all didn't change. And I don't want to disappear anymore. Marcello said no more. That night the house was quieter than ever, as if something had broken, and we all knew it could never be repaired. The following days were of constant tension. Valentina behaved like a stranger. She bumped my shoulders forcefully when passing by, left doors open so noise would reach the utility room where I slept, changed mealtimes. Sometimes they didn't serve me anything. But it no longer affected me the same way. I knew that too had to be noted, documented. Every offense transformed into evidence. Luigi accompanied me to the first hearings. Hearing my story in front of strangers was humiliating and liberating at the same time. I told everything. How I gave up the ranch out of love. How they relegated me. How I gradually lost my place. Sophia wrote a letter that was presented to the judge. Her words were so pure, so honest, that even the court clerk had to look away. My nonna has always been there for me. She took care of me when nobody else could. I saw when they left her out, when they no longer talked to her, when they pretended she didn't exist. I don't understand why someone can treat the person who gave us everything like that. Luigi read it with a measured voice. It was then I understood that my granddaughter had more courage than many adults. I smiled at her from the stand. She, sitting in the back bench, returned my gaze with bright eyes. In parallel, Francesca became my support. She gave me strength when I wanted to give up, reminded me who I was before all this. One day she took me walking through a nearby park. She talked about her life, how she traveled alone at 50, the decisions that distanced her from her family, the wounds and scars it cost her to heal. Freedom doesn't come suddenly, Isabella. It's built, and it hurts. But when you reach it, there's no turning back. That phrase kept echoing in my head. One morning we received notification that a conciliation hearing would be held. It was the last opportunity to reach an agreement without a sentence. I went with a tight heart. Luigi explained that if Marcello accepted, we could establish in writing an agreement. Private room, free access to ranch spaces, respect, and a proportional part of my social security for me. We waited in the small room. They arrived late. Valentina entered as if coming from a party. Marcello, on the other hand, had sunken eyes. When the mediator explained the conditions, Valentina stood up indignantly. "This is blackmail." "It's an agreement," said Luigi. "And it's voluntary. Nobody forces them. But if they don't sign it, we'll go to trial, and there the judge will decide." Marcello swallowed hard. He looked at me for a moment. I thought he would accept, but Valentina touched his arm, whispered something to him, and he looked down. "We don't accept." The mediator nodded. "Then the trial continues." We left in silence. That night, without saying a word, I prepared a small box with some important objects. Photographs, old letters, a handkerchief my mother had embroidered for me, and Sophia's letter. I hid it in a corner of the utility room, wrapped in a plastic bag, like it was treasure. Because it was. Not for its material value, but because it represented what they could never take from me. My memory, my truth, my history, and now also my decision to never be silent again. The following weeks became colder, denser. Not because of the weather, but because of the atmosphere breathed inside the house. Everything became silent, like a forced calm, before a storm everyone knew was inevitable. I moved with caution, as if each step could provoke a new explosion of screams or cutting looks. Valentina seemed determined to show me I had no power over anything. And every day she found new ways to do it. She changed the lock on the hallway bathroom, and now I could only use the one in the utility room, where there wasn't even hot water. She put latches on the pantry where they used to keep basic foods. She left me stale bread, unsalted rice, and watery coffee. I didn't complain. I just noted everything. Luigi had asked me to document every hostile act. I kept a notebook hidden among my books where I recorded dates, words, actions. I was no longer a resigned victim. I was an observant woman silently collecting evidence with patience. Sophia, for her part, was increasingly rebellious. She began staying at her friend Anna's house to avoid arguments. She asked her father to let her sleep some nights at Francesca's house, and although Marcello initially allowed it, Valentina quickly put a stop to it. She said Francesca was filling my head with nonsense and didn't want her daughter influenced by a crazy old woman. Sophia confronted her. I had never seen her scream like that. Valentina slapped her. I saw everything from the half-open door. I ran toward my granddaughter, hugged her, and covered her with my body, as if she were still a defenseless child. Valentina yelled at me not to interfere, that it wasn't my business. Marcello came down late. When he arrived, Sophia had already locked herself in her room, and I had a trembling hand over my chest. He said nothing, not a word, not a reproach, not comfort. He just looked at Valentina like someone watching a fire, knowing it had already burned everything. The next day, Sophia didn't go to school. She stayed with me all day, sitting in the shade of the patio without saying much. I prepared her hot chocolate, the same I used to make when she was little. She asked me if I was ever happy. I told her yes, many times, although it had been a while since I remembered. She smiled sadly. I want you to be happy again, Nonna. Maybe that's no longer for me, dear. Yes, it is. You just have to believe it. That night I wrote in my notebook, Sophia still believes in me. I must believe in myself again. A few days later we received a court notification. The trial date had been set. Luigi called to explain the details. Hearing that we already had a formal hearing made me tremble, not from fear but from the certainty that what was at stake was much more than a dwelling. It was my dignity, my place in the world. Marcello and Valentina found out through the official mail. I didn't say a word. Neither did they. They locked themselves in their room and spent hours murmuring. At night, Valentina left the house without saying where. Marcello stayed alone in the kitchen. I saw him sitting with his head in his hands, as if suddenly all the weight of the universe had settled on him. I approached, not out of compassion, but necessity. "Are you okay?" I asked. He looked up. His eyes were red, as if he had been crying or hadn't slept in days. "I don't know how we got to this, Mama." "Yes, you do. But you don't want to accept it. She told me you wanted to take the ranch from us, that you were going to leave us on the street. And you believed her?" "I don't know." I sat across from him. The silence between us weighed more than any word. "Marcello, I don't want revenge. I don't want to ruin your life or Sophia's. I just want respect, peace, my own space, an old age without fear. But you were fine before, weren't you? I was quiet before. There's a difference." He said nothing more. He just nodded, as if finally understanding something. Not everything, but something. He went to sleep without looking at me again. The trial was approaching. Francesca took me to buy clothes. She insisted I should present myself confident, firm, like the woman I had been before. She combed my hair, applied light makeup, gave me a blue scarf she had brought from Morocco. She said it was to give me strength. That morning, looking at myself in the mirror, I saw myself differently, more upright, more present, as if I was finally beginning to recognize myself. At the courthouse, Luigi was waiting for me with his briefcase. He was impeccable, serene, with that way of speaking that inspired confidence. He gave me some final instructions, And then we entered. Marcello arrived alone. Valentina refused to attend. Sophia was with Francesca, who had taken her to the park. I didn't want her to see all that. Inside the courtroom, the judge observed us attentively. He listened to Luigi present the facts, presented documents, photographs, testimonies. We read Sophia's letter. The judge asked for it to be read aloud. His tone changed as he read it. He stopped several times, as if the weight of each word was too much to continue straight through. Marcello looked down. He said nothing. Only when it was his turn did he ask for forgiveness, not excuses, apologies. He acknowledged his silence, his emotional abandonment, his complicity by omission. My mother doesn't deserve to live like this. I failed as a son. I acknowledge it. The judge looked at him gravely. Are you willing to correct that? Marcello nodded. The judge took a moment and then dictated his decision. He must restore a private room to me, free access to common spaces, full respect for my autonomy, and return part of the control over my income to me. A formal warning was also established for Valentina, who must refrain from any hostile action against me, or could be criminally prosecuted. I left the courthouse in silence. Luigi accompanied me to the exit. Francesca and Sophia were waiting for us outside. My granddaughter ran toward me and hugged me so tight, I felt all my bones align again. You won, Nonna. No, dear, I just recovered what I should never have lost. That night I returned home with my head high. Marcello received me at the door and offered me tea. He didn't talk much, but his gestures were different. Valentina wasn't there. She had gone to her mother's house, indignant about the ruling. I didn't know if she would return, nor did I care. I slept in the room that had once been mine, clean, organized, with my things back in their place. I lit a candle, prayed silently, and for the first time in a long time, I fell asleep without fear. During the weeks following the trial, the house seemed to breathe differently. The air was no longer so charged with tension, and although I couldn't say the calm was complete, at least the open war seemed to have ceased. Valentina didn't return immediately. According to Marcello, she had taken time to think, although I suspected her real objective was to pressure him emotionally. I didn't comment on anything. My role was no longer that of mediator or silent victim. It was that of a woman who had decided not to allow more abuse, no matter from whom. Marcello began showing small signs of repentance. He asked if I needed anything when he went out, if I wanted to accompany him shopping. He even cooked a couple of times, something he had never done before. I accepted cautiously. It wasn't resentment that made me keep my distance. It was the desire not to confuse kindness with redemption. Years of abandonment aren't erased with a couple of kind gestures. Sophia, for her part, was increasingly closer. She helped me organize my things, spent afternoons with me talking about everything and nothing. She asked me to tell her stories about when her father was a child, and as I related the good memories, I was also reconstructing the broken parts of my own past. One afternoon, while we were having met in the patio, she said something that stayed with me. I thought adults couldn't change anymore, that if someone was selfish or cruel, they stayed that way forever. But you changed, Nonna. You became stronger. Maybe I didn't change. Maybe I just went back to being who I was before letting myself fade away. Then I can change too, can't I? I took her hand. Her gaze had a depth I had never seen before. It was the look of a girl beginning to understand the complexities of the world. I told her yes, that we could all change. But first we had to have courage. She already had it. A week later, Valentina returned. She entered the house without greeting, with tight lips and a lowered gaze. Marcello hugged her as if nothing had happened. I didn't say a word. She passed by me as if I were invisible. In her mind, she still resisted the idea that I had won something. She was convinced her power was untouchable. But now everything had changed. Every time she tried to impose something, Marcello stopped her, not with force, but with a firmness he hadn't had before. He told her things had changed, that she must respect the limits that law and coexistence had established. Valentina looked at him with contempt, but kept her words to herself. She knew any false step could turn against her. Tension returned to the house, though in a more underground way. Valentina no longer shouted or confronted me directly, but left small provocations, dirty dishes on purpose when she knew I needed them, abrupt channel changes when I was watching something on television, whispers on the phone where I was clearly the topic. I noted everything, as Luigi had taught me, but not with the purpose of denouncing, but as an exercise in clarity. Having a record helped me not fall into doubt, into that emotional trap that had caught me so many times in the past. One night I heard a loud argument between them. Valentina was shouting at Marcello that he was no longer the same, that he was letting a bitter old woman manipulate his life. He responded with a phrase I never thought I'd hear him say. "She's not manipulating me. She's reminding me who I am." After that there was a long silence, then firm steps, and a door that closed violently. The next day Valentina had left again. I observed everything without intervening. It was as if now the conflict no longer belonged to me. It was between them. I was on the sidelines, and that sideline was freedom. Luigi called to ask how I was. I told him the situation at home was tense but bearable. He asked if I had thought about moving. I told him yes many times, but I still hadn't found the right place. He offered to help me search. He said he knew a couple of residences for older adults that weren't nursing homes, but active communities with workshops, activities, and above all, independence. The mere idea scared me at first, but then I began thinking that maybe I deserved to have a space where I didn't have to measure every word, every step. That night, Sophia heard me talking on the phone and asked, "Are you going to leave?" "I don't know yet. What do you think?" "I think you should do what makes you happy. But if you leave, I want to visit you every weekend." I hugged her. Her maturity, her loyalty moved me. She was the reflection of everything I had tried to plant in this family. And although in many aspects I had failed, in her there was a seed that had germinated. Days later I received an unexpected call. It was my younger sister, Luciana. We hadn't spoken in years. She told me she had heard what happened, that she found out through a mutual friend who had seen the publication of the judicial ruling in the legal bulletin. She asked if she could come visit me. I accepted with reservations. We had pending accounts, old wounds that never completely closed. But something in her voice sounded genuine. Seeing her cross the threshold of the house, I felt a mixture of emotions. Nostalgia, distrust, tenderness. We spent the whole afternoon talking. She asked for forgiveness for not being present. I confessed that I had also distanced myself out of pride. Between tears and laughter, we remembered our childhood, summers at Grandma's house, mischief with our cousins. It was a necessary reunion. It reminded me that despite everything, I still had roots, still had someone to count on. Luciana offered to let me stay a few days at her house, to take a break. I said I would think about it. When she left, I sat in the patio rocking chair. The sun was setting, and the sky had that tone between golden and orange that seemed to promise something. I didn't know what, but something. In that moment, I felt a deep certainty. I didn't have to stay where I wasn't welcome. Not out of stubbornness or pride, but because I deserved something better. Sometimes the bravest thing isn't fighting to stay, but deciding when to leave. And although I still wasn't clear when that day would be, I knew it was approaching. Upon entering the house, I saw an old photo of Marcello and Sophia in a dusty frame. I took it, cleaned it, and carefully placed it on the shelf. Then I went to sleep in peace, for the first time in many years, in real peace. After Luciana's visit, something changed inside me. It was as if that conversation had removed a layer of old dust covering my memories. I began understanding that the problem wasn't just the relationship with Valentina, or even Marcello's emotional abandonment. It was something deeper, the habit of making myself small so as not to bother, of staying quiet so as not to generate conflicts, of postponing my own desires to maintain a fragile family balance. I no longer wanted to live like that. I had turned 66 carrying guilt that wasn't mine, accepting crumbs of affection as if they were feasts, waiting for recognition from those who only knew how to demand from me. I wondered why it had taken me so long to wake up, but I also understood that sometimes only when one hits rock bottom can they see clearly. That clarity led me to make a decision. I began looking for places where I could live on my own. I didn't want a luxurious or modern place, just a site where I could have tranquility, dignity, and above all, freedom. I talked to Luigi. He sent me several options. I took my time to see them. One in particular caught my attention. It was a small complex of apartments adapted for independent older adults, with gardens, a community library, and art workshops. It wasn't a retirement home. It was a living space designed for people who, like me, still had much to do, to learn, to feel. Just imagining myself there provoked a mixture of nerves and excitement. I told Sophia about it. She looked at me silently, and then, with eyes full of tears, hugged me. She told me she was proud of me, that she always thought grandmothers were there to take care of others, but now she understood they also deserved to take care of themselves. That night I slept with a new serenity. I no longer dreamed of the past. I dreamed of the future. Valentina returned a few days later, this time with a more contained, almost neutral attitude. Maybe she had resigned herself to the new dynamic. She didn't try to argue with me or impose her presence, but she didn't approach either. It was as if I no longer existed in her world. She observed me with suspicion, as if she didn't understand what I was still doing there. So calm, so at peace. But that didn't matter to me anymore. I no longer feared her contempt. It had lost power over me. She was a woman without power, when she couldn't manipulate, and that consumed her. Marcello began showing interest in my decision to move. At first, he seemed confused, as if he didn't understand why I wanted to leave now that everything was calmer. I explained that it wasn't about running away, but about growing. That one also grows at 66. That it wasn't abandonment, but a way of honoring my history, my wounds, my process. It was hard for him to accept, but he didn't prevent it. He offered help organizing the move. I declined politely. I wanted to do it my way. In parallel, I received an invitation from Francesca to attend a literary meeting at the Cultural Center. I was encouraged to go. Upon arriving, I was surprised to see so many women my age sharing stories, readings, poems. I felt part of something. For the first time in a long time. I wasn't just Marcello's mother or Sophia's grandmother. I was Isabella, and that was enough. At the end of the event, one of the coordinators approached to invite me to participate in an autobiographical writing workshop. I hesitated but accepted. Writing was something that had always attracted me, although I had never dared to do it. I sat in front of the blank page and began writing my story, not with hatred or sadness, but with pure and painful truth, and as I wrote, I felt the words washing my soul. Each page was another step toward my liberation. One Saturday afternoon, while having tea with Sophia, I told her I had chosen the apartment where I wanted to live. I showed her the photos. Her eyes sparkled. "When are you leaving?" she asked with a lump in her throat. "Soon. I want to organize everything calmly." "Can I help you decorate your new house?" "Of course, my love. It's going to be our project." That complicity was a balm. We began planning together, The colors of the curtains, the type of plants for the balcony, the pictures for the walls. We laughed as if we were building a magic castle, and in some way, we were. A few days later, I received an unexpected call from Francesca. She was in the city for a medical appointment and wanted to see me. We met at a cafe. Seeing her moved me. It was like reuniting with a part of me that had been suspended in time. She listened attentively while I told her everything I had lived through. She congratulated me on the trial, won, on the decision to move, on the courage to break the cycle. She told me many women lived decades trapped in oppressive family dynamics, that I was an exception. I didn't know what to answer. I didn't feel special. I felt simply fed up. But I understood her point. Most stay quiet. I couldn't anymore. When I returned home, Valentina was waiting for me in the kitchen. She looked at me with a mixture of defiance and annoyance. Without beating around the bush, she said, "So you're leaving?" "Yes," I answered calmly. "Soon. And you plan to take Sophia too?" "No. Sophia is your daughter. I'm only taking my freedom." She let out a dry laugh. She gave me a piercing look. "Don't think this makes you a better person. Abandoning the house is just another form of cowardice." I stayed silent for a few seconds. Then I looked at her firmly. "I'm not leaving out of cowardice. I'm leaving because I finally understood I don't have to stay where I'm not loved. That's not weakness. It's dignity." She left without responding. I sat down to breathe. The scene didn't hurt me, didn't anger me. It confirmed I was doing the right thing. The next day, I began packing my things. Sophia helped me enthusiastically. We separated books, photos, memories. In each object there was a story, but I no longer clung to them with sadness. It was a necessary detachment, a part of me saying goodbye to this house. Not as a physical place, but as a symbol of what I had tolerated too long. Marcello passed by occasionally, observing in silence. I noticed it was hard for him, but also that he respected it. One night, seeing me organize my papers, he approached and said, "I know I wasn't the son you deserved. Don't punish yourself, Marcello. What matters is what you choose to do from now on. Are you going to forgive me? I don't have to forgive you. I just want you to be better. For yourself, for Sophia." We hugged. It was a short, awkward gesture, but real. Everything was ready. I only needed to set the date. I sat down to write in my notebook a list of things I wanted to do in my new life. Learn to dance tango, take painting classes, visit interior towns, read all the books I had postponed, dream at my age as if I were 20, because the soul doesn't age when one nourishes it. And then I understood that the end of a stage wasn't a tragedy. It was an open door, a new story to write. And this time, I would be the protagonist from the first line. The morning I moved dawned gray, but not rainy. It was as if the sky respected my moment, accompanying me in silence. I woke up early. I hadn't slept much, not from anguish, but from contained excitement. I dressed calmly, prepared coffee, and toured each corner of that house that for years had been alien to me, despite living inside it one last time. Each wall seemed to whisper episodes that now dissolved like smoke. I didn't feel sadness. I felt closure, as if I were leaving a stage after interpreting a role too long. Marcello appeared in the dining room doorway with swollen eyes. He said nothing and hugged me. I caressed the nape of his neck like when he was a child. We didn't need words. Sophia arrived shortly after with a luminous smile. She brought in her arms a plant we had chosen together for my new balcony. It was a robust ficus, intense green, strong like I wanted to feel. She carried it proudly while we got into the car that would take us to the new beginning. Valentina didn't say goodbye. I didn't see her that morning. I didn't hear steps or doors, as if silence were her last word. And I didn't need it. The absence no longer hurt. It was part of the relief. The journey was brief. Sophia talked non-stop, making plans for the next weekend. She wanted to sleep over with me, meet my new neighbors, decorate my reading corner. I listened to her with a swollen heart. That girl had been my anchor in the middle of the storm. Thanks to her, I remembered who I was. We arrived at the complex mid-morning. The building had a modest entrance flanked by flowering bougainvillea. The doorman received us kindly and handed me the keys. Upon crossing the door of my new home, I breathed deeply. Everything smelled of fresh paint and possibilities. Light entered through a large window, illuminating the space with welcoming warmth. Sophia ran to open the curtains and exclaimed that the balcony was perfect for our reading afternoons. We got to work, hung curtains, assembled the bed, placed books on a shelf. It was little but enough. At lunchtime, we sat on the floor on an improvised tablecloth and toasted with lemonade. She looked at me and said, "Nonna, it feels like a happy house." I answered that it was because finally, I was too. The following days were a dance of discoveries. I met Clara, my next-door neighbor, a 72-year-old woman who taught watercolors at the Cultural Center. She invited me to her workshop. I attended. My first brushstrokes were clumsy, but made me laugh. I hadn't laughed like that in years. I enrolled in a course on art history, another on meditation, and one on advanced writing. The hours filled with activities that nourished me. I wasn't in a hurry. I wasn't afraid. I felt an expansion. Every time Sophia came to visit, we shared our stories like two friends telling each other about life. She talked about her school, her doubts, her dreams, and I listened with full attention. I wasn't the grandmother who only gave orders or advice. I was a woman who accompanied, who learned to listen without judging, and she thanked me with her sincere affection. One afternoon while walking through the park surrounding the complex, I saw a woman sitting on a bench crying silently. I approached without invading and offered her a tissue. She looked at me surprised and thanked me. We began conversing. Her name was Dolores. She had lost her husband recently and had no children. She told me she felt invisible, that nobody listened to her. I spoke to her about my own wounds, how I had lived so many years being a shadow within my own family, and for the first time in a long time, I saw reflected in another face the same pain I had carried in mine. From then on, we began seeing each other every week. We walked together, shared books, cried without shame. Loneliness hurts less when shared. A month passed. I felt more alive than ever. One morning, I received an email from Marcello inviting me to lunch. I accepted. We met at a cafe near his work. He was nervous. It showed in the way he looked. He told me he had started therapy, that he needed to understand why he had allowed so much damage. He asked for forgiveness again, this time with different humility. I believed him. He spoke about Valentina, how their relationship was wearing down, how he feared repeating patterns with Sophia. I told him the bravest thing he could do was break them now, before hurting more. We said goodbye with a long hug. I saw him walk toward his office with slightly less heavy shoulders. That night I sat down to write in my notebook. I noted a phrase, "Love is not sacrifice, it's freedom." I repeated it to myself several times like a mantra. It was my new compass. Days later I received a visit from Francesca. She brought me a book she knew I would like. We sat on the balcony between laughter and memories. She told me I looked different, more luminous. I told her about my workshops, my walks, my incipient garden. She congratulated me and hugged me tightly. I told her that without her help, I wouldn't have gotten this far. She answered that every step had been mine, that she had only reminded me I had legs. That night I slept deeply. One Sunday, Sophia proposed making a video for school about the bravest woman you know. I agreed. She recorded me telling my story. I spoke naturally, without drama, just with truth. The video went viral among her classmates. Several grandmothers identified with it and wrote me letters. One said, "Thank you for saying what so many of us keep quiet." Another, "I thought it was too late to start over, but now I know it's not." I cried reading them, not from sadness but from hope. My story, with all its blows, could serve to light other people's paths, and that was a gift I didn't expect. The deepest change, however, was internal. I no longer felt guilty for choosing my peace. I no longer doubted if I had done the right thing. I no longer wondered if someday they would thank me. I did everything for me. And that wasn't selfishness. It was justice. Every morning I looked at myself in the mirror and recognized myself, not as the perfect mother or ideal grandmother, but as a woman who survived her own story, who rewrote it, who made it completely hers. One afternoon I received a call from Sophia. She was crying. She told me she had a strong argument with her mother, that she felt misunderstood. I told her to come over. When she arrived, she threw herself into my arms and asked to stay a few days. I prepared her bed tenderly. While she slept, I caressed her hair and thought, how beautiful it is to be able to be refuge, not out of obligation but out of love. How beautiful to offer shelter without losing oneself in the process. Then I understood something more. That true freedom isn't being alone but being able to choose whom to be with. And I could finally choose. The ending didn't come with a great explosion or dramatic blow. It was a whisper, an instant of clarity in the middle of everyday noise. I received an unexpected call one ordinary afternoon. It was Marcello. His voice sounded softer, more human. He told me he wanted to see me, that he needed to talk to me sincerely, without masks or reproaches. I felt my heart accelerate, not from fear but from the opportunity that was opening. When he arrived, I received him with a mixture of nostalgia and hope. We talked for hours. He confessed how much it had cost him to understand the damage he had caused, not only to me but to Sophia and himself. He admitted Valentina had had a toxic influence on his life, but also assumed responsibility for his actions. It wasn't an empty apology, but a commitment to change, to be a better father and better son. I felt something in our relationship being reborn, something I thought was lost, forever. That encounter didn't erase the past, but opened a path toward forgiveness and reconciliation. It wasn't easy or quick. There were moments of doubt, of pain, but also of growth. Sophia returned to trusting her father, and I found in myself the strength to let go of resentment and build a new story with them, though without forgetting the wounds. Because healing isn't forgetting, but learning to live with the scars that make us who we are. Francesca continued being my great support. Her friendship was a firm anchor on uncertain days, and a celebration in moments of triumph. With her, I rediscovered the joy of sharing, of laughing without fear, and of dreaming without limits. Together we planned a trip, a small escape we had always postponed. It was an adventure that returned confidence in the world and in myself. We walked streets I never imagined traversing, breathed new air, and immersed ourselves in cultures that taught me life always has something more to offer, regardless of age. Valentina disappeared from the horizon, at least from my present. I didn't need confrontations or revenge. Her silent departure was enough. In her place appeared a peace I didn't expect to find. That peace born when you decide to leave behind what hurts you and open space for what nourishes you. I felt free, free from others' expectations, free from imposed guilt, free to be simply me. The garden I planted on my balcony grew vigorously. Each green leaf was a promise, each flower a celebration. I cared for it with dedication, and sometimes Sophia and I would sit there to read, to dream, to plan futures that before seemed impossible. That connection with the earth taught me life is a constant cycle of sowing, waiting, and flowering, that one can be reborn as many times as necessary. My social security, which before was a reason for contempt, became a symbol of independence. With it, I learned to manage my finances, plan my expenses, administer my life with autonomy. I didn't depend on anyone else to survive, to decide, to live. That gave me a dignity no insult or contempt could take away. The day Sophia returned home with a medal from an art contest, her eyes shone more than ever. She told me everything she had learned with me had inspired her to be brave, to follow her passions without fear of making mistakes. That declaration was the greatest prize I could receive. My legacy wasn't material goods or invisible sacrifices, but sincere love and the teaching that you can always start over. Finally, I understood that the greatest gift I gave myself was allowing myself to be happy without conditions, without apologies, to be happy in my way, with my timing and my decisions. That happiness was my silent revenge against those who doubted me. I didn't need to prove anything to them. My life spoke for itself. Thus, in this new stage, I built a home that was truly mine. A space where laughter replaced tears, where light conquered shadows, where love manifested in simple but powerful forms. A home that didn't depend on titles or possessions, but on the inner peace I had cultivated with so much effort. And while I write these words, I know my story isn't unique or perfect, but it's real. It's the story of a woman who found her voice when many thought it was too late, who decided she deserved respect, affection, and dignity, who learned to love herself without conditions and let go of what didn't make her grow. Because in the end, it's not the social security or the house or the years that define a person. It's the capacity to reinvent oneself, to get up again and again, to move forward with an open heart, willing to receive the best life can offer. That, nobody can ever take away from me.